Europe trembled under one man's name, Napoleon Bonaparte. He conquered kingdoms, crushed coalitions, and built an empire stretching across the continent. To the world, he was unstoppable. But in 1812, Napoleon made a decision that would destroy his invincible army. He invaded Russia. He thought he'd win the war in weeks. Instead, it became a march through hell. Fire, starvation, and by the early 1800s, Napoleon ruled most of Europe. France stood at its peak. Kings feared him, armies fell before him, and Europe bent to his will. But one nation refused to obey: Russia. Tsar Alexander had secretly traded with Britain. Napoleon saw it as betrayal. He decided to punish Russia with force. In June 1812, he launched the largest invasion Europe had ever seen. Over 600,000 soldiers marched east. Poles, Italians, Germans, all gathered under Napoleon's banner. He believed one great battle would bring. The Russians refused to fight head-on. Instead, they retreated deeper and deeper into their own land. But as they fell back, they burned everything. Villages, crops, food stores. Even entire towns disappeared in flames. Napoleon's army, expecting to live off the land, found nothing. No food, no shelter, only ashes. And the deeper they marched, the more men they lost to hunger, exhaustion, and disease. Still, Napoleon pressed on. In August, they reached Smolensk. Napoleon expected a decisive victory. Instead, he found another firestorm. Russian troops withdrew, but not before torching the city. The French soldiers entered Smolensk not as conquerors, but as survivors. No food, no shelter, no surrender. This was the first sign that the campaign was doomed. But Napoleon ignored it. In September, the Russians finally turned to fight near the village of Borodino. It became one of history's bloodiest single-day battles. Over 250,000 men clashed in a storm of cannon fire and chaos. The ground shook, smoke covered the sky, and thousands died within hours. By nightfall, Napoleon won the field, but not the war. The Russians retreated again, leaving behind tens of thousands of French dead. Days later, Napoleon reached Moscow, expecting peace negotiations. Instead, the city was empty. Its people had fled. Moments later, fires erupted across the capital. For days, flames devoured Moscow as Napoleon watched from a distance. There was no surrender, no supplies, no victory. The Russians had burned their own capital rather than yield. For over a month, Napoleon waited, but Tsar Alexander never came. Winter was closing in. At the Borodino River, the Russians tried to trap the survivors. Thousands of men crowded the freezing banks. French engineers built 2 makeshift bridges under cannon fire. Explosions, screams, soldiers falling into icy water. Horses, wagons, bodies, all swept away. Napoleon barely escaped across the river. His army did not. Of the 600,000 soldiers who invaded Russia, only a few tens of thousands made it home. Europe was stunned. The myth of Napoleon's invincibility shattered forever. Within 2 years, his empire began to collapse. And it all started in the frozen fields of Russia. Napoleon might have conquered kings and nations,